Hi friends, welcome back. Today we are doing part 2 of our painting from start to finish. I'm still working on a name. I've been referring to it in my head as Reflections. I don't think I like it, but what you gonna do? Today we're gonna be working on the trees, reflections, obviously, and we'll just kind of build up the background a little bit so that next time we can focus on the focal point. Should be a fun little video, and I hope that you guys enjoy. Let's get to it. So when we left off, I basically had only done the background, and I'm still really happy with how the background itself turned out. I think it was a really great base for what I had planned. And the steps that I'm going to show in this video took me honestly a lot longer than I thought they were going to. I did end up I probably cut out an extra almost half an hour of time out of this video that was just me mixing paint colors. I didn't think we needed to keep in a bunch of dead time. If I can figure out a way, which I guess would involve me getting a second camera, but if I could figure out a way to be able to show you my palette while I'm painting too, I actually think that would be a lot of fun, because I do a lot of color mixing and I do it all on the palette, and I tend to kind of mix my colors on the fly. So I think that would actually be really fun to show you guys how I do it and how I come up with what colors I'm going to be doing at what time. I don't know, I just think that would be kind of a fun thing to add. I would need to get it in the budget first, but you know, it's an idea and a girl can dream. So the plan at this stage of the painting is to add in a bunch of trees and then paint their reflections on the bottom half of the canvas. So I had one major issue while I was doing this, in that this is the first time I've really actively done reflections, and I continually forgot that I was going to have to reflect these shapes on the bottom portion. So, oh wow, thunder. Crazy thunder, my goodness. Anyway, so I kept painting the top half of the painting, and then I would get a few steps down the line, or I would switch colors and then realize that I shouldn't have switched colors because I still needed to add that reflection. I think that happened with almost every stage of these trees, and by the end of it I just kind of felt a little bit dumb. I think it would have been a lot easier on myself if I had remembered to do those reflections immediately, because the shape would have been more readily in my mind too. I think if I had done one tree, done its reflection, done the next tree, done its reflection, done the next tree, done its reflection, I think that just would have worked better in the long run. But I think it worked out fine anyway. At the end, I think it looks good. There's a couple of things I think I could have done better, but again, not really having done reflections before, it was a bit tricky to get those shapes pseudo correct. And of course, they didn't need to be perfect. It's water, so the shape in the water doesn't need to exactly match. It wasn't supposed to be perfectly still water. It needed to have a little bit of movement to it. And of course, the reflection in the water isn't generally exactly perfect anyway. You get those ripples in the water that will distort the shape and all that. You never quite look exactly the same in a water reflection. You got to think about the angle and everything. So I think it did turn out well but at some point here I'm going to recognize that I need to remix that light color so that I can do the reflections in the water. I'm planning on there being a light source in this video that is in the brightest spot of the canvas. There will be an element that is emitting light. So I'm working really hard to add the correct shading to all of my tree branches, which really didn't make things any easier when it came time to do the reflections, because I don't know, there's just something about doing a reflection and doing the same thing that you just did but doing it backwards that it's really tricky. Honestly, I would categorize this painting in one of the most difficult ones that I've ever done. This was hard. It took a lot of concentration, a lot of very, very deep thinking just to get the shapes of the trees pseudo correct. And at this point, with doing these trees, I am terrified of the next stage of this painting. I am, of course, planning on putting foxes in this painting, and they're gonna have to be reflected on the bottom half of the canvas, which means I'm gonna have to paint a fox and then paint it upside down. So that'll be the next video, but for this one, we're focusing on the trees, and I'm trying really hard to not think about those foxes because it's just too scary at this point. I do think that the trees came out nicely. I am pretty pleased with their shapes. Again, there's a couple of things I think I could have done better, and I think I would do differently the next time I do a reflection painting. But for the most part, I am pleased with how this turned out, and I'm really happy with this painting in general. I think, as I've said like a million times already, reflections are just really tricky, and it was really fun to play with it and to see that I can do something like this, because I think everyone does, you tend to stay in your wheelhouse and you stay with the things that you know that you're good at. So it's good to really challenge yourself and try something that you haven't done before or that you've only done a couple of times before, and just play with it and see if you like it and see if you can do it. And the nice thing with painting is that if it doesn't come out well, I can just paint over this canvas. I can just gesso over the whole thing and start over again. If I'm super not happy with something, I have a fairly good capability of stippling color over and color matching to the colors that I've made before to disguise mistakes if I need to. And that's one of the really nice things with paint, is that I can just go over it again, especially with it being gouache and acrylic gouache, because all of my colors are fully opaque. So if I need to, I can just go back, add color over the top, change it, and make it the way that I wanted it to be. So I do kind of have a little bit of a crutch in that regard, which I think it's helpful, at least for me, to have the knowledge that if something goes wrong, I can fix it. I think I would have a really hard time painting in a medium like markers or oils, or even really pastels to some extent, because there's just not, with a lot of other mediums, there's not a ton of things you can do to fix it if you put the wrong color down. I think acrylic painting in general, acrylic and acrylic gouache both, are just very forgiving. And for someone who has kind of, because I'm relatively new to this, because I haven't been painting full time for, not even full time, this is my part time thing, because I haven't really been painting as a serious commitment for more than a couple of years now, the thought of not being able to fix something is just, that's really scary. And I think having that would just, honestly, in a lot of ways, prevent me from painting as much as I do. So, like I always say, gouache is my happy place. I'm pretty sure that I've done an element like this in one of my other paintings. I don't remember if that was one that I did on the channel, but I know that I showed you guys that painting, and it's probably been on Instagram. But the plan for this piece is that this thing I'm painting right now is supposed to be almost like a little magical tear in time sort of thing. I don't know if it's in time or if it's in space. I haven't really decided. But it's this magical little element, this source of light that's nearby this glassy lake, and it's emitting this bright white blue light that's highlighting those trees and highlighting the leaves in the background and giving everything this bluey greeny glow. The other painting that I did that had this is, it's just a little, I think it's an 8x8 square. It's a wood board, and it's one of my favorite little paintings that I've done. So I wanted to find a way to bring that into the Fox series. I thought the foxes really needed to experience this little element. And I'm pretty sure in that original painting it was also above water. And I thought to myself that it would be really fun to have it be, to potentially have that original painting be a part of this series, just not one that has the foxes in it. And then this is just a different angle on that element, that light source, that is now the foxes being introduced to it. I just thought that would be kind of a really cute thing to do, and a really fun way to bring this little light source, this little magical element or entity that I just kind of painted on a whim one day. It's really interesting to me, and it's really beautiful to me, and I wanted to paint it again. So really, this painting, I wanted to do a reflection piece, and when I decided that I was going to do a reflection piece, I knew that I wanted this light source to be a major part of it. I wanted to really bring this little element into my Big Fox series. I think I had originally planned on the Fox series only being like 10 to 12 canvases, 10 to 12 little paintings, and at this point I am pretty decided that it's going to be an open-ended series. I don't know how many paintings are going to be in the series. Off the top of my head, I don't even really know how many paintings are in it right now. It's probably a good 9 or 10. And honestly, I have so many ideas for the expansion of this series that I don't think it's going to be one that I will end anytime soon. I think it's just going to be one of those little art series that goes on forever and ever and ever. I don't know, maybe one day it'll reach like a natural conclusion. But for right now, I have so many ideas, and I am so enjoying the series that I don't have any intention of ending it. And at this point, I have gotten those trees that are the farthest back in the background, those are painted in. The element is done, and now I'm working on the mid-ground trees. So these are like a medium green. They're a little bit darker, I think, than that ground line. And again, you'll notice that I didn't just immediately paint the reflection. I felt so silly every time that I realized it too. I was just, why didn't I paint the reflection? Like, the whole point of this painting was to do reflections, and then I kept forgetting to do them. It was kind of ridiculous. They turned out fine. I'm not displeased with any of the reflections. I'm just displeased with my ability to remember to paint reflections. I do honestly find it pretty hilarious that I continually forgot to put them in. But as you can see, I have now put in the trunks of 3 trees and not the trunks of 3 tree reflections. I did really want to play with, because as per usual, I'm always working on multiple things at the same time with my paintings. When I pick out a painting that I want to work on, I usually have a couple of techniques that I'm practicing or techniques that I want to try out. So this one, I've got reflections and I've got light. So that element is the light source. So it's shining super brightly on the trees that are the closest to it. So the element is supposed to be the farthest thing back. And then is those light blue trees. And then it's this layer of trees I'm doing right now. And I'll do one more layer of trees on top of this. And I was working really hard to get highlight lines and low light lines put in on everything so that it was a little clearer just by use of color alone where everything was positioned in space. I do a lot of big, like, mountain or hilly scenes where it's easy to tell where things are in space because you visually know which mountain is the farthest back and that the one closest to you is the one that has the stuff on it, the one that has the fox and the tree and the rocks and all that. But I don't often do these flat horizon line paintings like this. So getting the lighting correct on a piece like this is very much a challenge for me, which is why I've been practicing it so much lately. This one and my last one with the 2 foxes, I don't know if I showed you that whole painting, actually. I will one of these days, I'm sure. But this one and that one both, I was really working on getting the lighting correct and showing depth of the scene through lighting in general. I really, really like how much depth you can add to a piece by just getting that lighting spot on. It's super interesting to me that you can paint a whole background of trees, but as soon as you add that light and get it right, as soon as you add that sunlight or that beam from the element or moonlight or whatever it may be, fireflies even, as soon as you add that, you just add so much life to a painting. And it's a really, really beautiful thing when you get that lighting right. So it's one of the things that I really want to work on and hone and perfect. I think that I'm pretty good at it most of the time. There have been times that I forget to highlight things because I'm so in the zone and I'm so focused on one particular section that I know where the light is, but I forget to add that little pop of a super bright color that would add that life that we expect to see when the sun is hitting something, or when a really bright light is hitting something, or even that kind of pale color that we get from a cool light like the moon. Sometimes I get so focused on the thing itself that I forget to pay as much attention as I should to the lighting. So it's just something that I am working on honing, that I am practicing as much as I possibly can. So I'm trying to do paintings like this, paintings that are a little bit more outside my standard wheelhouse, paintings that aren't just hilly or just focused on one specific large tree, or, ones that are just a simple horizon line with a reflection in the water. It's a chance to really, really hone those lighting skills and to really hone the skill in the details, because there's not as much room to hide mistakes when you're doing something like this. I feel like when you're painting something like mountains or hills, it is a little bit more forgiving in a lot of cases. But if you're doing one like this, where it's just a simple horizon line and there's not a ton of detail, if something looks wrong, it ends up looking very wrong. So you have to be much more particular with where you put your lines, with where you put your colors, with where you put your lighting. And that's something that I have grown to be more aware of over time. But as always, it's a thing that you just have to practice. So I may as well practice by doing a painting like this. The other thing that I really want to work on, that'll probably be my next big painting, is that I have this idea to try a very abstract watercolor background and then try to paint and like a landscape over it. So try to use that abstract watercolor as the base and build it out into a fully fledged, like full big gouache painting. I don't know that it would necessarily fit into the Fox series. It would depend on what I was able to get with the background colors, but I think that could be really, really fun. I'm sure I've seen other artists do it before, but I've seen a lot of artists, watercolor artists in particular, doing really cool, just abstract backgrounds or abstract paintings in general lately. And I love watercolor. As some of you guys know, I started out my painting in abstracts. So abstracts hold a really special place for me in my heart. They're really fun, they're really beautiful. I am particular with my abstracts. I like if it is an abstract representation of something rather than just random lines that it feels like anybody could paint. But I do really love abstract, and I think it would be really fun to bring some abstract into my paintings. And you'll see I do have like elements of abstract. I have that like stippled tree background on this painting. That's abstract technically. There's nothing there. It's just splotches, but your eye knows that it is something. It is representing something. I really like, particularly with watercolor can get these really very organic shapes when you're doing an abstract, and it's just beautiful. And because gouache is watercolor, I've been thinking it would be really fun to make something with just that really cool, really natural looking watercolor background, and then taking that and overlaying on it a landscape or a seascape or something really fun, something that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse. So at some point we may play with that on this channel. Not sure. We'll see. For now, I am focusing on these trees and on getting those darn reflections right. This little tree on the side was a challenge. I drew it a little bit funky, I guess. I painted it in at a little bit of a funky angle and then was like, oh no, how am I gonna paint that? So that one was very much a challenge. The one that's the closest to the front, the one in the center of the canvas basically, was probably the easiest one to get the reflection on because it just has the two main big branches. I did make sure that I did not do a tree that had any super sprawling branches or super intricate branches. I did not want to have to figure out how to do a reflection of a super intricate tree. Not for this painting anyway. I don't want the trees to be the main focal point in the first place. The focal point should be that magic source, and once they get put in, the foxes. The trees should just be the background. They should just be the setting. They should be the thing that grounds the painting, but not necessarily the thing that draws your eye. I think I actually really succeeded in that as well. I feel like I toot my own horn a lot on this channel, but like, I'm really happy with a lot of my art lately. I feel like I have spent a lot of time honing some very specific skills with my art, and it is really exciting to see it all come together into these really pretty paintings that honestly, I have so many of them at this point that I don't even know what to do with them. I don't honestly think that I want to keep very many of the originals. I will probably put all of them for sale on the website when the time comes because I have more that I want to do. I have more paintings that I want to make, and I'm gonna run out of space. So I hope that some of you are interested in buying some originals and potentially even collecting some originals. I would be so honored to have any of you purchase some of my paintings. Really, I would be incredibly honored by that. I know some of you have commented and said that you're excited to buy stuff, and that makes me so insanely happy. I can't wait to be able to share my art with you in a way that means you can have pieces in your own homes. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but I can't wait to really be able to share it with you guys even more. So at this point in the painting, I am adding some texture to that horizon line. So I'm taking a slightly lighter green than what I had down originally, and I'm basically just adding a more natural edge that looks a little bit more like grass or plants or bushes or something living and not just a static flat line. The flat line was easier to work with originally just for placement purposes, for texture reasons too. It is, gouache does have a little bit of texture to it sometimes. So if I was to put down this texture first and then put the trees on top, some of the trees would have a spot in the trunk that has this texture. So it makes sense to put this in closer to the end of the painting. but I did want to make sure that there is a more natural edge to this horizon line. The more I was painting this, the more I was realizing just how flat and sort of unnatural that edge looked. It didn't really fit. It needed to be alive. It needed to have something grassy, something planty, something living. I know there's going to be foxes at some point, but it's not just animal life that makes a painting come to life. The horizon really needs to have that little bit of a rough edge. Even when I'm doing mountain pieces, I have to remind myself to add in that little bit of texture, that little bit of rough edge to the top of a mountain, because even rocks, they don't generally have a really smooth, crisp edge to them. They're textured. They've been weathered. They've been struck by lightning. They've been worn down by rain and wind and snow. And it's really easy to get so caught up in your lines that you forget that life happens, and life happens even to things that aren't alive, like rocks. I think just adding this little bit of texture here added so much to this painting. It looks alive now. It looks like this could actually be a place, because it's not just a flat, static green line. It has some movement and some dimension to it. And that was, again, exactly what I was going for. And here, again, I am adding a little bit more of that grassy detail. This time I'm going in with a darker green right at the bottom edge. So this will be the closest edge to the water. Therefore, it's not bright because it's the farthest thing from that light source. And because it's right up against the water, I'm also adding in a reflection in the water. And this, I think, is one of the things that really made it clear that this is water, that this is not just some weird thing that's reflecting. It is water. It is reflecting everything. It's reflecting the grass, not the glass. It's reflecting the trees. It's reflecting the element. And then next time it'll have foxes. But just adding this little bit of grass right at the edge too, I think this added a lot of dimension. I honestly didn't think that just adding this little bit of grass would add that much detail and that much depth to the painting, but it added a lot. I'm very pleased with how it turned out. You'll see some closer shots when we do the foxes. I'll do a zoom in on those. But even from this distance, which is closer to the distance you would naturally be viewing the painting from, just that little dark edge, it's making it clear where the water line is. And again, it's just really interesting how light and dark can show depth just by nature of there being light or dark. The human eye is honestly so fascinating. It's a really fun thing to play with in painting, to think about, well, when I look at color, how do I perceive color in terms of depth, or how do I perceive depth in terms of color when you look out at a field or out at a mountain or at the edge of a lake. It's really interesting too. I actually did some research into this. I live in the high desert, and in the high desert, there is no mist between you and the mountain, which makes it really, really difficult to paint a mountain, because your we have grown accustomed to, if you're seeing a mountain in the distance, there is mist between you and it. Because if there's humidity, there's mist. But if you're in the high desert, there isn't any, and it can really make it look like the mountain is directly in front of you and not miles and miles and miles ahead, which is really tricky when it comes to painting. So if you see a really good painting of the Southwest, but you think to yourself, well, the depth doesn't look quite right, that's probably actually what it looks like. And I just think that's really cool. It's just, I don't know, depth in a painting is really interesting to play with, and it's really fun to see the different ways you can almost trick the eye into seeing what you want it to see just by playing with color and playing with hues. It's fun. I think that this painting is really turning out well. I am honestly a little bit surprised by how well it's turning out. I thought that it was going to be a little bit of a hot mess for a lot longer than it was, so pleasantly surprised. I will probably do more reflection paintings in the future. For now, this is my big reflection piece. And I might actually hang this one in my house when it's done, assuming those foxes come out well, because it's just really pretty. And honestly, I've painted some teal walls in my house, so adding a nice teal painting would just, it would go. But I hope that you guys have enjoyed watching me paint this painting. We will have one more video in this series where I will show you while I paint the foxes, and I am honestly pretty scared of that. We will see how it goes, and hopefully the foxes do not ruin this painting, because again, right now I think it looks pretty good. Looks pretty darn good, and I don't want to mess it up. So hopefully the foxes come out well, and hopefully you guys like this painting as much as I do. I think it's a really fun addition to my collection. It has been really fun to walk you guys through how I've been doing it and kind of talk about my thought process while I'm working on a painting like this. It is so much easier to record that thought process audibly after I'm done with the painting. Plus, it's just kind of nice to watch a movie while you paint. I don't know. There's something more chill about it. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in a couple of weeks when we'll paint some foxes together. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!